You're watching The World with me, Charles Aniagolu. Let's bring you some breaking news now that's just coming through from London, the United Kingdom. Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, has announced that the UK will recognize a Palestinian state at that UN meeting in September. That's the General Assembly meeting, unless Israel meets certain conditions. He says the recognition will happen unless the Israeli government takes substantive steps to end what he called the appalling situation in Gaza, including a ceasefire and a commitment to a long-term peace process. Most countries, about 139 in all, have now formally recognized a Palestinian state, and you may know that last week France pledged to do so at that same UN General Assembly meeting in New York in September. But the news that's breaking at the moment, the British government has announced that it will recognize a Palestinian state in September unless Israel agrees to a ceasefire in Gaza and also a commitment for a long-term peace process. We'll bring you more on that as it continues to develop here on Arise News. Now, the Kremlin says it's taken note of President Trump's statement giving Vladimir Putin 12 days or less to make progress towards peace. Its spokesman, Dmitry Peskov, said Russia's special military operation continues, but Moscow remained committed to a peace settlement. There was another night of Russian bombardment of targets across Ukraine. These included a hospital where 3 people died and a prison building in Ukraine's southern Zaporizhia region where 17 people died when a Russian glide bomb hit. Dozens were wounded. Zaporizhia is already partially occupied by Russian forces. Officials in the region say Russia struck with 8 glide bombs overnight. Meanwhile, Russia says Ukraine attacked the Rostov region with dozens of drones overnight. Officials said 1 person was killed and a freight train was set on fire. The attacks came the day after President Trump announced a newer, shorter deadline for Russia and Ukraine to agree to a ceasefire. But so far, according to reports, the Russians don't seem too impressed. Well, for more on this, I'm joined now on the line from London by the international affairs analyst, Dr. Marek Laskiewicz. Dr. Laskiewicz, thank you very much indeed for joining us. So Washington increasing its pressure on Moscow, backing up its ultimatum with threats of 100% tariffs on imports from Russia, and also secondary sanctions on countries that continue to buy Russian oil and gas. But I understand that the Russians aren't quaking in their boots.
No, they are not. The reason why is they've been through sanctions before. Sanctions now are, I think, the least of their worries, in the sense that America has not threatened to provide Ukraine with some war-winning weapons. It is, in fact, in some ways, the least that President Donald Trump could do. It is borne in mind that from the first day of the war, I stated that sanctions are next to useless, that what Ukraine needs are arms. And so from that point of view, no, Russia isn't quaking in its boots. Moreover, there's a second problem. Donald Trump keeps changing his mind. 1 minute it's 50 days, now it's 12. No real reason, incidentally, given why it's only 12 as opposed to 50. One can only surmise the recent developments over Gaza have meant that he has to make a diplomatic coup of some sort to regain the initiative. So overall, this recent development will not change the war's progress, which is one of a steady Russian advance.
Let me just quickly point out, because we mentioned at the outset there that attack on a prison in Zaporizhia. We had said that 16 people, I believe, were killed, 17 people actually. Well, that number has gone up now to 25. Just a quick footnote there. And we're talking about the 50-day ultimatum and now the 10 to 12-day one. The Russians seem to think that it's aimed either at a US domestic audience or at European politicians who want more anti-Russian actions. And they say it's not really aimed at Russia. Do you agree with that assessment?
Yes, but I would actually order a third alternative, because what's happened recently is that France, and as a result Europe, has, so to speak, come back from the dead, in the sense that it's been disregarded by USA, claimed to have no real influence in Ukraine or anywhere in the world, and simply a second-rate, if you like, continent. And suddenly France, by recognizing the Palestinian state, because in diplomatic terms France is one of the big nations, has completely altered the diplomatic course of the war in Gaza, and has actually left the USA looking isolated with Israel, and also the USA being, so to speak, out of it. It's France that's making the running there. And so, in my opinion, he has done this about Russia to regain the initiative on the world stage, as well as, to back up your point and the Kremlin's, to show the Europeans that USA is still doing something about the war.
And as one Russian newspaper put it, ultimatums are usually presented to the losing side, but in this case, Russia is winning. So the paper asks, why should Russia agree to an immediate ceasefire to satisfy Ukraine and its allies?
Well, the answer is it doesn't have to, and it gets worse than that. That is correct. There's another aspect to it as well. What is he going to do apart from these sanctions? Well, we presume nothing. And the point about the sanctions is, because America is being increasingly isolated, it's cut itself off from Europe in many ways and the rest of the world. Because America is being isolated, please note, economically, and this is another reason why I think he's brought sanctions in mind, because many nations are signing up to no longer using the dollar as their reserve currency. It means that America is being sidelined. If, therefore, the sanctions go ahead, it is entirely possible they may backfire in the sense that some nations may prefer to carry on trading with Russia and its other trade bloc than with the States, because trading with the States, in any case, is now fraught with uncertainty, because you never know when Donald Trump's going to bash you with more tariffs, so to speak. And so from this point of view, the whole business is one that America, right now, I think probably Donald Trump will rethink and tighten up in some ways, because it's not clear this is a winning strategy for USA. And as you rightly point out, Russia certainly being winning at present, it's not actually all that threatening to them.
And of course, we know that the Russians and the Ukrainians are attacking each other. We're talking a minute ago about the Russian attack on Zaporizhia, and of course the Ukrainians also attacking Rostov. But what's the latest that you're hearing about the situation on the front lines and the fighting there?
Well, increasingly they're heading for Pokrovsk. This is the goal that Russia really wants. It would appear that if they get to Pokrovsk, it will be such a major victory in their eyes that they may well, from that reason, not decide to go necessarily any further, but to look on what's happening elsewhere in the world. But the point is that they're making slow but steady progress, admittedly at cost, but Russia being the nation with, indeed, and of course its ally North Korea, which can expend troops, that's not a fundamental problem. It's never been a problem for the Russians, and so all the reports you hear about Russia being unable to carry out because of the cost in blood, that is not Russia. Russia's always paid heavily in blood, and indeed in World War I or World War II, for that matter, even the Afghan campaign, blood was something to be accepted by the Russians, and they do so. So therefore, what is happening? Steady progress elsewhere. And the business of the bombs, which you're referring to, throwing bombs at each other and missiles and so on, this is part of Russia's tactic to try and weary the Ukrainians, which to some extent is succeeding. wearing the Russians doesn't really work, the Ukrainian ones. It's rather their spectacular coups in taking out expensive hardware, which are more important. But bombing here or there by Ukraine matters nothing in Russian eyes. Conversely, there is evidence, according to polls, that Ukrainians are more weary of the war, and this is why Russia keeps on these attacks on civilian population.
And just before we let you go, let me take you slightly off-piste there. Not entirely, because I mean you've done a lot of analysis of the Middle East for us, and you mentioned France and Gaza just a hot second ago. But we heard just a minute ago that the UK will recognize a Palestinian state at that UN General Assembly in September, unless Israel agrees to a Gaza ceasefire and to make substantive moves to end what Keir Starmer called the appalling situation in Gaza. What's your reaction to that, briefly?
Almost certainly it's been cleared with the Americans, and it would indicate that America itself is now less supportive of the situation on the Israeli side, because President Donald Trump has acknowledged their starvation. There's no doubt that Great Britain fully discussed it with the USA, and therefore it is already important in its own right, because Great Britain is, like France, a very important diplomatic country. It's also important because it's been cleared with America, so that whereas when France did it, please note the Americans condemned the French move, when the British did it, America stays silent, which means they're using Great Britain, if you like, as a sort of trial balloon. It wouldn't surprise me in the slightest that Donald Trump, with his 12-day target to Russia, is actually part of all these discussions which have been taking place. Because, please note, again, they're made in the context of the previous French move, but both Great Britain and USA almost certainly agreed both statements. And so therefore this is a very, very huge now pressure on Israel. And also there's the implication that America will not support it if it carries on. That's the deadly one for Israel now to ponder on, because this British move was done, I stress, almost certainly with tacit American support.
That's great insight there from you. Thank you ever so much. The International Affairs Analyst, Dr. Marek Laskiewicz, talking to me on the line from London.